Hey guys, it's Darcy. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today I'm coming at you at my hometown home from my desk, and I feel like this is very much the vibe for the video. Got the desk going and a little candle. So today's video is by request. I had a subscriber comment on one of my last videos when I was talking about doing some freelance writing, asking for a video about being a writer, and I thought that was a wonderful idea because I haven't really talked about it. I talked about my experience going to NYU's journalism school, but I haven't really talked about the experience since, or honestly just like how it fits into the larger scheme of being a writer and a journalist. So I love the idea, and here we are. I have a ton of notes on my phone, and I'm going to break this video up by about 4 parts. So first off, I'm going to talk about how I got into writing and like why I decided to study it in the end after I transferred to NYU, as many of you know, and why I decided to get like a degree in it, you know. Then I am going to talk about some tips. I have a ton written out. And then after that, I'm going to talk a little bit more about getting published and what that's like, and then finally my opinion on being a writer and whether I would recommend it, and sort of just like the tea overall. So if you're interested, keep watching. So first off, it's kind of funny that I actually was interested in being a writer when I was like in elementary school, and then I didn't have an interest in that for several years. I thought I was going to become a classical cellist, which is kind of a fun fact a lot of you don't really know about me probably. But yeah, my first byline, I guess you could call it, was in American Girl magazine, and I had a joke that they picked up. Yeah, I got paid for that, but it was the highlight of my year probably. I think it was 4th grade maybe, and I thought it was just like the coolest kid ever, and could not believe they actually like published one of the random jokes I submitted. I don't know why, I'm not a funny person, it just fit with their theme. So I'll see if I can find a screenshot of it, or not a screenshot because it's in print, but a picture of it. My mom found the like I don't know, cutout or whatever recently, like maybe a couple years ago, and she was going through a bunch of stuff. So yeah, that was my first official like byline, I guess you could say, even though it's not really. But yeah, so I've been interested in writing for a long time. I mean, I was a big reader growing up, and also just like have written for fun, I would say, like a lot of like diaries and stuff, and I was always a good writer in school, but I never considered that as being like probably part of my career until I would say my freshman year of college, which is why I ended up at a school where I couldn't really study journalism because that wasn't something I planned on going into college. And essentially I would say like going into my freshman year and during my freshman year of college is when I really started writing consistently a lot, and in kind of a more professional type capacity. I started a blog, and I started getting bylines randomly. Like I wasn't really trying to, it just all sort of happened. And essentially I started a blog about what it was like for me being in recovery from my eating disorder, and it was really reflective and just so cathartic for me. I never intended it to become anything larger than that, but then I had someone asked for me to write an article for a new website they were starting, and then I started writing for a couple different publications, had some more pieces get picked up. Not like anything I was getting paid, but I started being like really interested. I was like, maybe I could do this for real, like for, you know, my career. Like there's just such a like buzz you get when you see your name as like a byline in print or like online on a website. I don't know, there's just like nothing quite like it. It is like very fun to me. And so with that, I decided, I was like, maybe this journalism thing has something to it. But then I was like already not happy at William & Mary, and you know, they didn't have a program for journalism or anything comparable, so did decide to transfer to NYU, which has a great journalism program, which was definitely the right decision. And so through that, like I would say my sophomore year is when I really delve into reporting, and I didn't really realize or like know, I didn't have like the knowledge to know that it's just a very different type of writing. I was doing a lot more personal essays, opinion pieces until that point, and then reporting is so much more objective, or at least it's supposed to be. and you're not writing about your personal experience, you don't want to. And I'm definitely a very opinionated person, so that was hard for me at times. But I also think the work is so important, and I have so much respect for anyone who does reporting full-time. Like, it's so hard, you get so much rejection and all of that, which I'll talk about later in this video. And so that was most of my college, was very focused on reporting. That was, you know, the core of that NYU journalism degree by far, and that's just what they're focused on training people for, which go watch some of my videos talking about the program, because I definitely have some different opinions on that, but too much to go into for this video. Then as I graduated, I decided I didn't want to do reporting full-time because there was just so many layoffs happening in the journalism world, and also it's like kind of hard to support yourself out of school with that. So decided not to go that route right away, and I ended up working in marketing, as many of you know, and part of my job was still writing. I was writing a lot of articles to get publicity for the company, and as well as some copywriting, although that wasn't really my forte and like not really the focus of my job and why I got hired, but it was still something I worked on some. But it was more so articles about the industry that the company was in to get us press. And yeah, so I was still incorporating my journalism degree, and now here I am, not working there anymore, but trying to get some more freelance experience and do some more writing still, because it is still part of something I'm interested in, and I'm just trying to figure out where that fits in for me in my career and all of that. So I have written on a lot of different topics. I will link my portfolio below. I usually have my website linked, I believe, but I'll more directly link to some of my portfolio. I have pretty much all of my bylines there, besides a couple that are in print. But essentially the main sections I've talked about, or I mean I've written about, are the arts, news, a lot of different news, mental health, and then marketing and advertising from my old job. So I've written on a lot of different topics and a lot of beats within that, which is the word for different topics essentially. So I definitely would say I have like a lot of experience at this point, and I'm a pretty good writer. I mean, I don't know, you guys probably don't really know that if you like only watch me for my YouTube videos, but I mean that was like a big part of everything I was doing the past 3 years. I mean, I've been writing longer than I've been doing YouTube. So knowing all of that background, I did just kind of want to dive into my tips. I just wrote like a ton of different things down. This isn't really an exhaustive list, but some of the key things that I think are important, what came to mind. So my first tip that I feel like not enough people maybe say, but I think is sort of underlying, most people understand, is that reading is super important. The more you read, I think the better writer you'll be, because I have definitely read a lot throughout my life, and it just ups your vocabulary, ups your understanding of language and structure and composition and all of those things that are an important part of writing. And I think it also helps you like find your own voice as a writer, because you like can just like understand yourself in the context of like, you know, all the many writers out there. And it's just so important, and you also know what other people are writing about and what you can contribute that maybe no one else has. Then my next thing would be to write down every single idea you have. Even if you think it's horrible, you'll never use it, sometimes it'll come back and you actually will. So that's something that I always do. I use notes on my phone endlessly every single day for all sorts of different things, but if I have ideas, I'll write them down. Recently I've been writing down ideas on paper as well, because it's just something very tangible. So I just think that's so important, because you think you're going to remember an idea and you might not. And I also find that it's a little bit easier to get motivated when you have that idea written down, because you're like, it's something concrete. And then my next tip is literally with anything, the more you do, the better you're going to be at something. There's like that whole thing that it says if you do something for 10,000 hours, like that's when you become an expert, and I probably don't have 10,000 hours of writing in. I don't even know, but essentially the point is the more you do something, the better you're going to be at it. And writing is no exception. So even if it's just the most mundane things or stream of consciousness, it'll help you find your writing voice. Even if it's something you think no one cares about, you never know. I just started a blog because I wanted to write. It was literally not for anyone else, hardly. I didn't expect people to read it, and I mean, it's not like it had huge traffic or anything, but it was just that next step and next step and next step, you know? You gotta start somewhere. So And I think what a lot of people get scared of is the fear of the blank page and staring at the blank page, not knowing what to write. And I've certainly experienced that. However, I think the most important thing is to just get something down, even if it's a sentence. Like just getting something on that blank page makes such a big difference because it's just a place to start. And for me, a lot of times what I do is I'll write down the key ideas I want to convey, form them into some sort of structure, and then start filling in everything else. I think this is helpful for even like academic essays. I think just, yeah, the fear of the blank page, you have to get over that. And I mean, I certainly still have it, but sometimes you just like have to force yourself to do it and go from there. For me, my favorite part of writing is when you have that like spark of inspiration and you just sit down at your keyboard and it flows out of you and just makes perfect sense. In reality, that's not the case most of the times, especially if you're in school having to write piece after piece after piece. It's just not the most realistic, but some of my absolute favorite work that I've done is just like stream of consciousness of like this spark of inspiration. I wrote this piece reflecting on Shane Dawson's documentary about Eugenia Cooney, and I wrote that in like just sitting down after I watched it. So maybe I'll link that down below too as like a specific example, but most of the time it's not like that. It was just more that I had a reaction right in the moment. And if you do have that spark, no matter the time of day, what you're doing, I think you should sit down and write, because then you can go back and tweak and edit, but for the most part it might be like actually really successful. However, like I said, you know, sometimes that's just not the reality. So what I was saying about like putting those key ideas down, getting that structure, like that for me is what I do when I need to push myself to do something. However, with that, like burnout is very real. A lot of people, you know, talk about writer's block. I definitely think it's very real. And sometimes you need a break, honestly. Sometimes you have to push through it and, you know, just get something on paper, but sometimes you do need a break, and I definitely have experienced that, because sometimes you just literally feel like you want to bang your head against a wall, like your brain hurts, you're like the words just aren't there, and I do find that's where my writing is the worst. So it's definitely a hard line to walk because you have a deadline to meet. However, it's not going to be as good, and so I don't have a very easy answer for that. I would say that's the worst part of being a writer, besides the fact that there's no money in it. But yeah, it's definitely like very hard when you need to write something, especially if it's something you're not passionate about. It's definitely easiest for me to write about things I'm passionate about, like mental health, and sometimes you report on topics you're not that interested in. I do think that work is easier though when you do pick something you're interested in, so I highly recommend doing that, as you know, as far as you can. And then one other little tidbit is I don't know why, I just love this. It's the letters TK, and essentially it means to come, but instead of using a C, use a K, because in the English language you almost never have the letters T and K next to each other, so they stick out, and essentially what it means is content in a certain place is to come. So you haven't written it yet. So, you know, many times in my journalism classes, you know, you're still waiting on an interview or something, you would put TK because, you know, this is coming, it's just not here yet. And I think that's honestly like super helpful. I'll still do that sometimes and be like, okay, this is gonna come, I'm not gonna worry about it yet. It will come to me mentally, it'll come to fruition in some way, just not right this moment. So I also think that helps with the fear of the blank page and writer's block, is just acknowledging you don't have to have everything right off of the bat. You know, writing is a process, and editing is part of that process. Coming back, adding things, tweaking things is all part of the process. So next I want to talk about getting published, and I feel like maybe people emphasize this a little too much when they're first interested in writing, because it is like the end goal to a certain extent. However, I don't think it needs to be the end all be all. If you're just interested in it as a hobby, like you don't have to get published. So but for those who are more interested in a full-time career or something, like, you know, this is part of the experience obviously, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, things I didn't know going into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is what the difference is between a lot of different titles you'll see, a lot of different opportunities and types of things you could consider doing. The first I will say is I've kind of been using writer and journalist. And when I say writer, I mean it in a more general sense. Like, you can write for almost anything, you know, books, novels, nonfiction, articles, like publications, I don't know, even like academia, copywriting. Like, there's so many different types of writers. And then Personally, I think of journalism as a much more focused, specific type of thing where you're writing in an objective way, most likely, and for a specific news publication, or even just like cultural publication, you know, something more like Cosmo. It's just a little bit more focused and a different type of writing because it is supposed to be more objective, less like opinionated, that kind of thing. So that's kind of one aspect that I didn't really know the difference between going into school and why I decided to study journalism as opposed to creative writing or media of some kind like that. And then with that, for journalists, some really want to go the direction of staff writer, which means you're on staff at a publication, writing for that publication full-time and only that publication for the most part. So, you know, every week or something like that. I did this at NYU student newspaper where I was a staff writer. I wrote pretty much one article every week, sometimes more, sometimes less, but roughly that. So you really get to know a publication, their audience, and you know, the topics they cover. And when I say topics, what that actually is the word beats. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. But so then besides staff writer, you also have freelance writer and contributing writer. Those can mean similar things or different things. Freelance is when you don't work for a publication full-time, but they're publishing your work still. So that article that I just wrote was basically freelance. They paid me a little money. I'm not on them full-time. I just wrote one article for them. I could write some more. It's often an ongoing thing. And then the other part of that is contributing writer. They're sometimes interchangeable, like I said, but usually it is a little bit more consistent if you're a contributing writer. So I'm a contributing writer on the Mighty. I write for them, you know, I've written for them for several years now, but it's not something I get paid to do. I'm not a staff writer, which would mean I would have to like write for them all the time. So there's some overlap there because you can be contributing and freelance, but I usually think of freelance as being like you're getting paid. I don't get paid for the Mighty, full disclosure, so I am just like a contributor basically. Now back to beats, as I mentioned. Beats can be kind of broad or kind of specific, but essentially it's the topics you cover within a section. So for example, news could be like a big section, and then within that could be you know, the latest coverage of the crisis X, Y, and Z, or some new development on transit. Like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of examples. Like I covered the L train shutdown, I covered the primaries for 2018, like some protests on NYU's campus. Those are like specific beats, I would say, where you track the development of a specific topic or just like focus on that. I think one of the hard parts about being a reporter, but sometimes one of the most exciting parts, is jumping into a beat. You have to learn everything about the topic you possibly can in a small amount of time, which can be very thrilling, and I'm interested in so many things, so I liked that. But it's also really hard because you're going to talk to experts who know way more than you, and you have to be willing to acknowledge that you don't know everything, and then do your best to like learn from them. And it definitely can be a challenge, but also if you like that, it can be really exciting and you get to write about a lot of things, or you like really focus on one beat and like dive into that beat and know that area so well, like almost like no one else, and you can be like the main writer on that topic. Also, one of the hardest parts about specifically being a journalist, but also just being a writer in general, is pitching. I do not like pitching very much because of the way it's treated. Essentially, pitching is coming up with ideas and then, you know, turning them over to an editor, and they tell you what they like and what they don't like and what they're willing to publish, what you're allowed to write about. And so like coming up with the ideas can be fun, but the actual process of like pitching, not so fun in my opinion. But that's also like, some people are really good at it, and then they're probably the people who are going to be the most successful as reporters. But I just think it's very challenging, and that's just how I feel about it. I don't know, it's just not my most strong suit. I feel like once I have something and like, you know, zeroed in on the focus, then I can like write about it and do well. But pitching is just the first stage of rejection you can face. You know, your preliminary ideas just like getting like shot down, but then I mean there's definitely like a lot of rejection in terms of, you know, if you want to interview people, they're gonna say no, they're gonna be annoyed. Some people hate reporters, which is why I like have so much respect. Their reporters are doing such an important job. and then just like rejection from editors, from publications, all of that. So you have to like really want it, I think, and you know, be passionate about it and willing to have that rejection. I definitely think being a reporter like toughened my skin. I still don't have the most tough of skin, but it definitely helped because you have to like deal with that more, and also know like when your idea is good and be willing to stick up for it, but also like admit defeat sometimes. Another thing I wanted to mention that I didn't really understand until more recently, I feel like we didn't really talk about this in school, but evergreen content versus like news hook and newsworthy content. In school we were very focused on newsworthy content, but then once I got out of school, a lot of evergreen content was relevant. So essentially evergreen is sort of like an evergreen tree, right? It lasts all year, it, you know, works long term. So that's how a lot of, you know, writing can be, if you want something to stand the test of time and be relevant still, versus newsworthy topics are, you know, something that's breaking news. There's a news hook, meaning that there's like something specific in the news that makes your article relevant. I guess another part of being published is just the more you do, the better you get at it, I think, to a certain extent. I'm still not that good. I'm acting like I'm an expert, but I'm really not, guys. However, I do have like a pretty extensive portfolio, and so I think a big thing to do when you're trying to talk to a new editor or trying to get a new piece published is cite publications you've already written for. So now I'm at the point where I can cite, you know, some of the bigger names that I have written for. And same goes in my case for like the NYU Journalism degree, because people do like know the program. But even if like you don't have any of that, it just starts, you know, start slow, start with a like smaller publication or student newspaper, any of that, and you can kind of work up from there, I would say. And in terms of getting into publications specifically, like a specific publication, you need to know their audience, and you need to go to know what they cover and how they write, because every publication is different. You know, writing for the New York Times is certainly very different from writing for Vogue. You know, you have to know their audience, what they cover. They aren't gonna ever want you to write for them if you like can't do that. So that's definitely something I've learned that is an applicable skill, because, you know, every single thing you write for or work for is gonna have a different purpose, a different audience, even if that's like social media or like copywriting for a brand, like all of that. Very applicable skill. So I guess my opinion on the tea is it can be really hard to make a living on writing full-time, but people do it. Like if you're passionate about it, if you're really good at it, you can do it. I definitely long-term see it as part of my career, but I don't see it as the only thing. I mean, so far it hasn't been the only thing, but it's been part of it, and I see that continuing. I'd love to maybe keep it on freelance long-term. I would love to write a book. That's like a life goal of mine. It's definitely hard, and I can't necessarily say I recommend doing it full-time, but I know people who are doing it out of school, and I mean, certainly had many professors who do it full-time, and as well as teaching at NYU, because most of them are adjuncts in the program. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. I'm not gonna tell you not to do it, because if you like it, if you're passionate about it, hey, you can do it. I would say definitely like building on your own perspective, like what unique perspective you can offer, is the best way to start, best way to go. I mean, that's definitely how I got into writing. That's where like I'm still the most passionate about writing things. So at the end of the day, I will definitely keep writing. I, like I said, love the buzz of seeing my name as a byline, and just the feeling of accomplishment you get getting to like share your work with others and hear your thoughts, and your thoughts be like, you know, permanently like inscribed somewhere. And I'll go back and read my old writing every so often and be like, wow, I can't believe I did that. And it's definitely a cool feeling. But I would also say a lot of writers have a lot of self-doubt, myself included. It's really hard to like fully believe in yourself, and there's a lot of self-criticism, I think, that can come with it. So having to get over that fear and doubt is definitely hard, but you can do it. So yeah, definitely leave comments below if you have more questions. I feel like this video is really long, so I hope it helped you, and definitely check out some of my other work and videos, all of that. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this. I could definitely talk more in depth about each of the things I talked about. But yeah, I'll see you all next time. Bye. Look at it, so cute.